Welcome to Podkey Daily News, your fast brief on security, markets, politics, and power. A presidential travel decoy operation turned into a press trust fight. Inflation cooled, but not enough to relax the Fed, and investors are talking about a possible $2 trillion AI IPO. Those three stories say a lot about where the pressure is right now: security, prices, and capital. The White House used an unusually elaborate decoy operation to move President Trump from one aircraft to another, reportedly using a lowered catering container, a decoy plane, and instructions for reporters to keep window shades closed, so it looked like he stayed on the expected flight. Officials tied the secrecy to a credible Iranian proxy threat linked to post-Soleimani security concerns, and some senior officials were read in, but at least some White House staff and journalists were not. The practical issue is that security secrecy is one thing, but the administration's public explanation that he changed planes for old time's sake made the story look less like necessary protection and more like avoidable misdirection. That matters because the White House press corps usually accepts some secrecy in exchange for later explanation and verification, and critics say that reciprocal arrangement is fraying badly. There is precedent for presidential decoys, but excluding the press from the real flight and then pursuing reporters who revealed it sharpens a bigger fight over accountability, operational security, and whether hostility toward the press is now creating its own risks. That tension is landing as Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt exits after 18 months, officially for family reasons, while expected to remain an outside advisor. She was central to the administration's aggressive posture toward reporters, so her departure comes at a moment when the White House media relationship already looks deeply strained. On prices, U.S. annual inflation eased to 3.4% in July from 3.5% in June, helped by lower gasoline prices. That's directionally helpful for households and for markets, and it strengthens the case for the Federal Reserve to hold rates steady in September rather than tighten again. But 3.4% is still well above the Fed's 2% target, and the near-term path is messy because energy markets are vulnerable to swings tied to the Iran war. So the next thing to watch is whether softer inflation broadens beyond gas or whether oil and broader energy costs undo the progress before the Fed can declare anything close to victory. The international contrast is extreme in Iran, where annual inflation has pushed above 80% and food inflation close to 130%, driving households toward buy now, pay later plans, even for basics like groceries and for stores of value, like gold. Primary results across both parties were mixed, which is the headline in itself. In Wisconsin, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley narrowly beat Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong after polling once showed Hong ahead by more than 10 points. That result will be read as evidence that centrist Democrats can still fend off progressive challenges in swing states where electability arguments carry extra weight. At the same time, progressives still posted real wins elsewhere, including Abdul El Sayed in Michigan and Peggy Flanagan in Minnesota. So there is no single Democratic center of gravity nationally. Republican primaries told a similar story of local limits on national narratives, with several Trump-backed candidates losing or getting forced into runoffs, and some contenders signaling selective disagreement with Trump in states where he remains a weaker brand. What to watch next is how both parties adapt candidate positioning for competitive general election terrain, rather than reading too much from any one state's ideological lane. In markets, investor talk around an Anthropic IPO is getting extraordinary, with expectations of a debut valuation at or above $2 trillion if it comes in October. That number is investor chatter, not company guidance, and Anthropic is in a quiet period. But the scale matters because it would signal that big capital still sees near unlimited upside in enterprise AI, even after months of bubble warnings. The bullish case is rapid growth, strong business demand for AI tools, and a perceived technical lead, but there are real risks from cheaper Chinese open-weight models and from U.S. commerce actions that recently forced suspensions of stronger models. The supporting story underneath the IPO excitement is infrastructure, not just software. Bank of America plans roughly $250 billion for U.S. data centers, energy, and critical minerals, and CoreWeave says its sales backlog now exceeds $100 billion while pushing for companies to help fund grid upgrades. So the next phase of the AI boom is looking more like a national industrial build-out with financing, power supply, permitting, and local community buy-in becoming just as important as model performance. In the West Bank, residents of Kusra say Israeli settlers surrounded Palestinian homes for days, cutting electricity, water, food, medicine, and access to healthcare in what locals describe as an effort to force them out and take property. Human rights groups say settler attacks on Palestinian communities are now averaging roughly 6 a day this year, with frequent killings, injuries, and property destruction. The core issue here is less any single clash than a pattern of attrition, where repeated attacks and weak prosecution can change facts on the ground without formal annexation. A domestic issue with direct budget consequences is the property tax backlash building in states including North Carolina, Wyoming, Florida, and Oklahoma. Average annual property taxes on U.S. single-family homes have risen about 34% since 2016 to more than $4,400, largely because assessments climbed so sharply. Voters frustrated by those bills are now being asked to weigh cuts to one of local government's most important revenue streams, which made up nearly 30% of total U.S. tax collections in 2023. If those measures pass, relief for homeowners could be real, but so could the trade-offs in school funding, hiring, and basic municipal services. Germany approved plans to expand surveillance and cyber powers in response to Russia-linked threats, reopening an old argument over security versus civil liberties limits rooted in the country's Nazi and Stasi past. China's COMAC EC919 just began its first international commercial route from Beijing to Ulaanbaatar, a symbolic step in Beijing's long effort to break the Boeing-Airbus duopoly, even if global expansion is still expected to be slow. And in Britain, direct foreign aid is being cut by more than 40%, with major consequences for countries including South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Congo, as London shifts strategic attention elsewhere. That's the brief for now. Thanks for listening to Podkey Daily News. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.